Hello and welcome back to How to Connect with Humans. This is Series 4, Episode 4. Hello Wayne, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
It's lovely to have you here.
You too.
Today we have somebody that is usually on this side, isn't he?
Absolutely.
Yes, he is. He's like the one that introduces us to the wonderful world of the principles so many times and so many teachers. And when we hear him talk, it's so crystal clear what he talks about, but with such a beautiful sense of humor and presence. I remember being at the London conference here for many years and just having tummy ache of laughing, hearing our wonderful guest speaker talk. So we have Aaron Turner with us, and Aaron has been around the principles for a long time, has pretty much brought the principles here to the UK, and started One Thought, and also the biggest Three Principles conference that there is around the world, which brings more than 1,000 people every year, and very bravely, with the people that he does the conference with, they managed to put it online last year, and that's what's going to happen this year as well, which was an absolute treat. That we want to go there and hug everybody, but so Aaron wanted to talk about, he called it At Last, a reliable direction to find answers and well-being, and we wanted to think it was our series, Aaron, but I think you're talking about something else, about a reliable resource. So welcome here. It's lovely to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you, and it's really nice to see everybody. It's so nice to see everyone. And just before we got on, Wayne and Carolina were saying that the idea is to come here together, to hang out together, and to talk. So that sounds great to me. So I don't want you to feel like I'm talking at you. I want you to kind of chime in. If you have questions, or if there's things that you would like to talk about or hear about or ask about, then I'm totally open for that. So when they asked me for the title, what I wanted to talk about, I had no idea who I was going to be talking to. I really didn't have any idea. And I can see that there are lots of people that have, lots of understanding here. So I know it's not a new group, but maybe I'll just start with what I thought in terms of the title. So I thought of this title because it's something that is just been coming home more and more and more to me, in terms of like when Sydney Banks discovered the principles and we were able to get some inkling of the direction that he was talking about. It was miraculous in the sense that he really discovered the direction where answers and well-being came from. And what's really fascinating to me is that I was looking when I came across the principles, which was a long time ago, and I was around it a long time before. Well, I didn't voluntarily get interested in it. I only got interested in it because George Pransky paid me to get interested in it. And the way that he did that was he paid me to do research on it. So he paid me to compare the principles to other psychological theories for a book that he was writing. And in order to compare them, I had to understand it first. So that's how I came to understand it. And what's amazing about it is I'd been visiting him for several years before that. And every time I'd visit, he'd have me sitting on a training. So I'd been to trainings given by George, given by Linda, Dickon, Judy Sedgman, but I've been to training given by all these people, and because of the way that I was looking for answers, I thought they were stupid. I thought the people were stupid. I thought the content was stupid. I thought the whole thing was stupid. And the more trainings I went on, the more convinced about how stupid it was. And it's a really good example of the way I was looking for answers. So at that time in my life, the way it started was they started talking to me about, oh, you could have more well-being. That's how they started talking to me. Oh, you could have more well-being, you could feel better. And that was the first clue that they were idiots. That was my first clue, that they thought feeling better had anything to do with anything. I knew that they were just some sort of hedonists. So because I was really interested in answers. I wanted clarity. I wanted to figure out my life. I wanted to make progress in my life. I wanted to do something interesting and worthwhile. And the way that I looked for the answers to those questions was I thought about them. I used my intellect and I thought about them, and I was taught to think what I thought was to think clearly, logically, and critically. And so I was thinking all the time. And because I was thinking all the time, I was rarely enjoying myself. I was always slightly harassed and preoccupied. But it didn't bother me because I was going in the direction that I was really confident that there were answers. So I wasn't bothered about having well-being, and I thought I was making that choice. It's like I could be happy without answers and get nowhere, or I could find answers, get somewhere, but I couldn't be distracted about how I felt. I had to just soldier on anyway. So that was the way I was looking for answers. So when George and Linda and the people that work for them started to say, oh, you could feel better, and here's our thing about how you feel better, I just thought they were barking up the wrong tree. I mean, they seemed really happy with it, which I was happy for them that they felt good. But it just didn't seem like it was for me at all. And I basically, everything they said, I criticized as I was listening to it, and I thought it was absolutely ridiculous and it was really unhelpful and all of that. Now, really fascinating is I thought I heard what they said and decided it was stupid. But when I was paid to take it seriously, so I was paid to look at it neutrally. I'm a researcher, right? So it doesn't matter what ideas I like, what's true, what's not true. It just matters, do I understand what's being said? So when I just tried to understand what was being said, it was new to me. It was totally new to me, which in hindsight means I hadn't heard a word of it before. All I'd heard was my own critical thinking. Oh, this is stupid. It's literally like, oh, this is stupid. How stupid is this? And I'm thinking, yeah, really stupid. It must be, or I wouldn't be feeling this way. But when I looked at it neutrally, it was so interesting. It was so interesting. It was fascinating. And I compared these psychological theories, and only the principles had the idea that you were perfectly mentally healthy already. That didn't exist in any other of the theories that I looked at. There was little loose ends that could suggest it, but there was no other approach that said, hey, listen, you got nothing to worry about. Your mind is pristine. Everybody's mind is full of love, clarity, well-being, genius. It's the essence of human consciousness. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't lose it. You can't hurt it. You can't damage it. You can't. That's the bedrock. Bedrock is the bedrock. There was nothing else that said that, and that intrigued me. And what intrigued me about it was, well, is that true? Like is it true or is it not true? And the gift of that question was, I'd never been able to question that before. Without that principle of mind, I'd never been able to question if I had a deeper potential. I'd never been able to question that because I'd had my experiences in life and I'd come to my conclusions and I was stuck with them. So my experience of life showed me, yeah, I'm really good at thinking, but I'm really bad at social things. So I didn't interview well. I didn't, I was full of social anxiety and self-consciousness and anxiety. So I couldn't easily socialize. I wasn't comfortable around people. My words didn't flow. It was not my element at all. And I couldn't do public speaking. I would get just swamped with anxiety and nerves in public speaking. And that was my experience. And I'd come to the conclusion that, and then I'd work hard, finding answers. I'd look for answers to that. I'd try to figure my way out of it. And I don't know if you've ever been nervous and tried to figure your way out of it. It gets worse. So the harder I tried to get out of it, the more convinced I became that this must not be my thing. This just must not be my thing. And the same with the conversation. I don't know if you've ever tried to figure out what to say in a conversation. Oh man, it just doesn't work. It's like you'd be thinking, what should I say? And by the time you've had an idea, the conversation's moved on. And then because you're anxious, you think your idea is no good. So then you have to think of another one. And it's like, it just doesn't work. So until I came across the principle of mind, I had no way of questioning the reality of that. And if anyone had questioned it, it would be, oh, well, that's your experience. It's not my experience. But that principle of mind is like, universally, there's a nature to the mind. And that nature is infinite. It's infinite and it's formless. And it is the intelligence it's an infinite intelligence. That piqued my interest. It really piqued my interest. I'm like, well, if that's true, then there were two things. If that's true, then I could feel better anytime. And also, if I feel better, that's what it feels like to have more intelligence. That idea that well-being and the spiritual intelligence and the feeling of well-being are the same thing, like an unrestricted intelligence and the feeling of depth is the same thing. That was really interesting to me. It was really interesting to me. And it got me really interested in more, how would I discover more of that? And that was when the other thing that stood out in my research that I did was all of the psychological approaches generally agreed that dysfunctional thought created people's problems, right? They kind of all agreed on that, except the principles. According to the principles, dysfunctional thought's not a problem at all until you make it a problem. And actually, you make it a problem by treating it like it's clear thought. In a way, that was my way of understanding. It's like there's nothing inherently dysfunctional about disturbed thought. It's treating it like it's insightful that creates the problem, right? And I thought that's fascinating too. That's really fascinating, and it fit what I was seeing. So while I was doing this research, I was watching client sessions. I was sitting in on client sessions, and one of the things that I noticed in the client sessions was nobody ever talked about anything that the clients were interested in. So you'd have a couple on the verge of divorce. There'd been an infidelity. We'd sit down. I'd be like, all right, let's get to work on this deal. And George would just talk like so generally, I could not fathom the link between what he was talking about and what they came in for. And even more interesting than that, I was the only one that was lost. They were following. And I was like, what is going on? Or like, and then what would happen is 2 or 3 days later, they'd walk in full of well-being. So 2 people that had been really uncomfortable, full of angst, suffering, uncomfortable in each other's presence, sniping at each other a little bit, needy and desperate and unhappy, would walk in holding hands, looking like they just came back from a 10-week holiday. And they hadn't been taught that. They hadn't been taught that. So again, I was like, I don't understand any of this. I haven't a living clue what's going on here. And then that same couple would talk about their situation like it wasn't a problem. They'd have complete clarity, peace of mind, perspective. They'd, when someone else tells you their problem, you can see the answer immediately. Well, not immediately, but when someone else talks about it, you're like, oh, you just need the blah, 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 right? Well, that would go through my mind when they were talking about their problem. When they had the well-being, they would say that same thing. And nobody else had told them that. So it got really, I was really, it got me really, really curious. It got me really, really curious. And what I started to, the second thing that kind of really helped me experiment with the principles was, it doesn't matter what thought you have. It matters. It matters if you know it's thought. Like if you know it's thought, that matters. And over the years, what's really fascinated me is that makes a big difference whether you're in a good place or not. Like if you're in a terrible place and you know it's thought, like not tell yourself it's thought to try and help yourself because you don't think it's thought. But like actually you see, oh, this is thought. Like I had a client a couple of weeks ago, and he was having trouble in his marriage. And we were meeting for 4 days. We met for the first day, and we just talked a little bit about the principles and kind of how the mind and all of that. And the next day he came in, and I said, well, how was your evening? What happened? He said, well, my wife started asking me about what I'm doing, and it started to go badly, and I started to panic. And then it occurred to me, oh, I'm all right. I'm all right. Like I'm actually all right. And like what I heard him say is, oh, I know mind is well-being and clarity, and I know suffering is just thought. That's what I heard in what he said. Like I know I'm all right. And that completely changed his reaction to his panic and to his upset and reactivity to his wife. It didn't change that he had all those thoughts, but it completely changed how serious he felt about them, how much suffering they caused, how hopeless he felt. And it completely changed everything, even though he had the same thoughts. Right. And that it's just absolutely huge to start to see, oh, we're experiencing different levels of depth or different levels of purity of consciousness or different levels of clarity through thought. As thought fluctuates, we're experiencing the effect of thought on a perfect mind. So there's this formless spiritual essence that we experience through thought, and we're just experiencing, what happens to it on the way up, kind of. And that is such a powerful discovery that it gave me an appreciation for there's a direction that answers lie. In a way, answers are already there, and you see them when you have the clarity to realize them. They're already there. Like it stopped making sense to be thinking to get answers. And what's really fascinating is it doesn't stop me thinking, but it stopped me expecting anything out of it, which is really, really helpful. So if I think for 7 days about a problem and don't get an answer, that makes total sense. Before, it'd be like, oh, this is a really tough one. I've been thinking for 7 days and I'm not getting anywhere. Now it's like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere because I've been thinking for 7 days, which is really, really helpful. And then to realize that there's well-being is already there. It's an experience of a more fundamental nature. And it's the same essence of the intelligence where answers come from, is just so right on. I mean, it's absolutely true. So every situation, mine or my clients, where I've looked in that direction, that's where it is. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because sometimes it's the really basic fundamental things that we overlook. Like, oh yeah, I understand that. Now what? And recently I've been starting to appreciate that no, there's no now what. This is everything. This is absolutely everything. It's like we live in a world like day in, day out, where I'm listening to people and talking to people that are suffering and confused and somewhat traumatized and victimized because they're looking for answers by thinking, and they're suffering the emotional effects of that, and they're looking for well-being and coming to the conclusion that it's hard to find. And everything's hard to find if you don't know where to look. And it just keeps striking me how just profoundly insightful and game-changing it is to have a sense that the fundamental nature of us as conscious beings is infinite intelligence and well-being, and that as we go in and out of more of an experience of that, that's just the natural effects of the fact that we experience it through thought. There's nothing more to it. So that when things, like during the lockdown, I've had periods where I've really started to get serious and negative and start to feel I'm losing that lightness. You know, when your mind's at ease and you're at ease, you have that feeling of buoyancy and lightness and confidence and hope, and start to lose that. And then really interestingly, this is such a good clue, I start to wonder why I'm losing it. And that tells you I've forgotten what I've learned. Because why would I wonder why I'm losing it? It's really simple why you lose it. You get wrapped up in the thoughts that have the feeling where it feels and looks like you've lost it. But and then I have these periods where I'm trying to figure my way out of it. But then it always comes a point where it's like, okay, let's go back to the truth of it. What's the fundamentals here? Well, they're not consistent with your experience, Aaron, because the principles say that you're naturally buoyant, but I'm not really seeing that these days. Oh, well, are you saying they don't apply? Yeah, no, they don't really apply here. Obviously, you're in new territory here. Well, if they did apply, what would they say? Let's just go with that. Well, if they did apply, they'd say that it's thought, that it's only thought that creates the appearance of, suffering and a negative outlook on life, a troubling outlook on life. Well, if it's just thought, how come it's lasting so long? Well, it would be kind of how seriously you're taking it, probably. I'm like, yeah, I think I could take this less seriously. that would be fairly easy to take this less seriously. And it's really easy to be like, well, it's effortless to try. It's effortless to try to take something less seriously. And then what's fascinating is, against my expectations, that kind of breath of fresh air starts to run through my experience, and that whisper of hope and promise and light, and it starts to come in, and then I remember, oh, it's the same game every time. There's nothing else going on. It's mind, consciousness, and thought. That's all that's going on. You're a spiritual essence experiencing life through thought, and everything that you see, feel, is a reflection of thought. That combination of mind, consciousness, and thought. And the last thing that I thought would be nice to say is for me recently, one of the things that's come alive a lot is looking towards my feeling as a feeling of my consciousness. Like that idea that pure mind and pure consciousness is pure mind. And just starting to consider, wow, I can literally feel that moment to moment. I can literally feel my consciousness. So I know exactly my level of depth or clarity or purity of consciousness. It's lit. And what's been fascinating is that's just been really helpful to know. Just all on its own. It's like, oh, what's this? Oh yeah, you have a pretty contaminated consciousness. That's just fantastic to know. It's so fantastic to know, because everything I'm thinking, feeling, sensing is just a product of that contamination, and it's got nothing to do with anything. And it's so great to know. And then you're automatically looking towards a freer mind that allows you to have a freer consciousness. And that's just been really interesting. I think before that, I had much more thinking about thought. Maybe thought and thoughts. Whereas actually it just boils down to, well, what does your consciousness reflect in terms of the balance of mind, consciousness, and thought, and your level of purity of consciousness, if you want to call it that. So that's all by way of just an introduction to what I was thinking when I gave Carolina and Wayne that title. But I'd love to know what you're thinking, or to hear from you, and kind of just have more of a conversation around it.
So if you would like to either unmute yourself or put your virtual hand up or your real hand up. So you could just ask a question. Again, if you want to ask the question in the chat, you can do that. You can feel free to unmute yourself. If you do the little hand thing that is down here, and is it on participants?
I think it's on reactions.
Reaction. Yeah, on reactions.
They've moved it.
There's a raised hand. They moved it. So feel free to do that. And I love the freshness of what you were saying, Aaron, about keep saying new things. Keep saying new things. Like
keep saying
that you keep saying new things, and you know that after so many years, like it's like, oh, like I know nothing really. Oh, I can't get caught like the first day. In a way, it's like
yeah, it's interesting because I've noticed over the years. I mean, when I first started interning at Pransky and Associates, what was interesting to me is I was an utter student. And one of the things that impressed me the most, that really stuck with me, is they were students. They were primarily students of the principals, and only through what they learned as students were they teachers. But I really got the feeling that they saw themselves primarily as students. And that's kind of how I went in. It's like there's endless, it's amazing that you can really have a sense of like, what's the direction in feeling where there's answers and newness, and there's endless levels of consciousness, there's endless realizations possible. And you can just keep going in that direction because you know what it feels like. Like, you know what it feels like when you think you know something and you're stuck in your ideas, and that feeling will dawn on you at some point. And you know what it feels like to kind of remember, to remember you don't really know. And that's very refreshing. And it's always, it's that getting a feel for that direction. Yeah. And you can see it in everybody. I mean, you can see it in everybody. So I could see when I joined them, everybody over the course of the years, you see that everybody would have a time where they got lost and didn't realize they were lost. You know, so you get disturbed, you get insecure, you get concerned, and you start treating what you're seeing as if it's real, so that you're in that illusion. And everybody else is like, hey, don't worry about it. And you're like, no, this and that. And then you're calling everybody. And so it's a really good example of having a disturbed consciousness, having disturbed thought, and treating it like it's reliable. That's how you get lost. And what was fascinating is, over the years that I was there early on, I saw every single person go through that they were lost and didn't realize they were. So they were treating their disturbed version of reality as if it was real. And then they were locked into that disturbed state and acting out of it and looking for help, and all, kind of like swimming in a riptide, basically. And it was so helpful for me because I realized, wow, that happens to everybody, and the symptoms are the same for everybody. So you feel really uneasy and you don't put it down to thought. You think it's your situation or you, and so that you live in that reality, and you think there's a good reason for a disturbed feeling. And it was true of everybody. Now, most of the time, they weren't that way. Most of the time, when they were upset or insecure or disturbed, they kind of took it in stride as thought. So I could really see, wow, as soon as you start to treat a disturbed thought like it's a real thing, and you operate out of the reality that you see when you feel bad, you get lost in predictable ways. And these are the symptoms. And they would say things like, oh, I shouldn't be teaching this. You get self-critical, and I'm not. And it was so helpful because when I started having those thoughts and wanting to say that, I remembered, oh, it's me now. I'm doing it. And it was so helpful. And that's what's really cool about seeing the principles as the direction of an answer. It's like every time you get lost, what you experience, what you see, what you feel are symptoms that you're going to come across next time. So you're going to come across them endlessly. So you've got endless opportunities to relate to them differently, as if they're not real, as if it is thought, as if it doesn't matter, as if it's not your problem. You get endless opportunities to have a different relationship to the same feeling, the same experience, the same perception, the same things that you say. And the more curious you are about it, the more you start to see the patterns. So when Leela and I used to visit George and Linda, we would go every year, and I started to get interested in the patterns that I lived by. And I started to notice every time we visited them, we would have a drama at the end where we were trying to change our plane ticket. And I was on the phone for hours and they wouldn't change it. And I was trying to get it changed. And it suddenly dawned, I think this happens every time. I think this happens every single time. So instead of thinking, oh my God, we wanted to stay longer and there's such a nightmare trying to change a ticket, it was like, what's happening in you, Aaron? Like, what is going on? And then you look in that direction, you start to catch on to what's happening in your mind and the way that you're having some sort of disturbed thought and running with it, and then kind of living out this reality pattern. And it was so interesting the first time I considered it, because it's like, this feels so real, and it feels like I should get right onto the airlines right now, but I do that every time. And just that inkling, like, oh, I'm blind to my own reality. I'm blind to my own reality. What's the feeling? And the feeling was kind of an urgent panic feeling, as opposed to, oh, should we stay longer? I don't know. Let's see. It was like, let's stay longer, call the airline. And it was really interesting to kind of look at my own impulses and thoughts more neutrally, more like, oh, are these symptoms or something, rather than great ideas? And it was really helpful. And what's really nice about that is, if you, anything that you have a, I don't know, blind spot about, you're going to have endless chances to see the telltale symptoms of it, because the telltale symptoms are happening every time it happens. Like, you go into a disturbed feeling state, you start to have certain kinds of feelings and impulses and thoughts, and they're there to be seen if you take an interest in it. Like, what's going on here? Not out there, but like over here. And so you get an endless opportunity to learn from your own experience, just by taking a more neutral look at it.
We have a question. They ask us to ask you if you can talk a bit more about shyness and self-consciousness.
Oh yeah, of course I can. I'm expert in that. I'm an expert in that. So what's lovely about this conversation is that everything we talk about will be an example of the same thing. It won't look like the same thing to you, because some things you treat like they're real and some things you see that they're thought. Okay, but it's going to be an example of the same thing. So I struggled with shyness and self-confidence, self-consciousness, from the age of 14 until I was probably at least 25. I can't remember the moment. I remember the moment, but I don't know how old I was, but in somewhere into my mid to late 20s. And before I learned about the principles, I was very self-conscious because I was anxious. So I would get an anxious feeling, and then I'd feel uncomfortable. And then when I felt uncomfortable, I tried to figure out what I should say or do that I could feel comfortable. And I thought it was something to do with how other people thought and felt about me. So I'd be trying to figure out. Now, the feeling that I lived in of discomfort, so shy, self-conscious, anxious, should have, if I'd known, it would have told me that my thoughts were a little unclear. Okay. But I didn't see that, because when I was in that feeling, I believed everything I was thinking. And I give you a really good example, right? And I'm not trying to outdo anybody here, but I was so self-conscious that if I walked into a big room and I happened to see two people at a table talking on the other side of that room, I would have the thought, what are they saying about me? I would have that thought, right? Now, you might think that's amazing, but listen to this. I would then think about that. I didn't think, oh, what's make you think they talking about you, Aaron? I would think, yeah, what are they talking about me? That's how I bought into my self-conscious thinking immediately. And it was all credible information to me. Okay. So that's that. And, you know, I didn't realize at the time, but I was socially anxious. Like if I wasn't, this is embarrassing, but if I wasn't intoxicated, I wasn't comfortable in social situations. I wasn't. Right. And even if I was, sometimes I wasn't. So I had already decided that I wasn't really a dinner party type person. And then I made up these reasons why, whether it was trivial chit chat and I was, you know, deeper than that. And, you know, but the real crux of it was I was really uncomfortable at dinner parties, and I was thinking like crazy to find a way to be comfortable, and I wasn't comfortable being uncomfortable. So that's kind of my experience of that. When I came across the principles, one of the things that made sense to me was, remember when I said I was doing that research, that there were these ideas that were the principles, and what these ideas, oh no, I'll go back one step. Well, no, I won't. So what these ideas were saying is, outside of the ups and downs of your thinking, you naturally feel at ease, content, happy. And I've been seeing that in the clients that I've been watching, that they would be in these situations, yet with nothing changing, they would just be at ease and content and, you know, very loving and compassionate and thrilled with life. And I was understanding that, oh, that's a neutral mind. That doesn't take any effort. That's just natural. And then you get disturbed thought and it runs through your system and it runs out. And it's like, it's kind of clouds across the sky. But you can walk around under a cloud, you know, like if you have a disturbed thought and you take it on and you start thinking it, well, then it's not a passing cloud. It's like you're creating cloud, right? So it's like it's not a cloud anymore. You're burning thought, and it's smoke that's blocking out the sun. Something like that. And I'd had an experience of that. So you might have heard me say this before, but I think it's important. I had an experience of that where, while I was on this research trip, Leela and I had just started dating, and she'd started to get sick of me because I was so preoccupied and somewhat boring. And she was backing away from me while I was away. And because my way of finding answers was to get intense and thinking about it, I got really needy and intense and anxious and was calling her every half hour, trying to have an anxious conversation with her to pull her back, which weirdly worked the opposite way. She wanted to talk to me less, the more needy and anxious I was. Chicks. Anyway, so I was ruminating about what should I do, and we'd all decided to go for a road trip. So we're sitting in the car, and I'm not thinking about my relationship problems. I'm not thinking about anything. We're having a really nice conversation. We're putting our seatbelts on. We're getting ready to go, and all of a sudden it occurs to me, oh my God, things are really messed up with Leela. What are you going to do? Right? This thought just kind of looms out, and it gets my attention. And because I'd been learning about the principles, I saw myself about to start thinking it. Do you know what I mean? Like a thought comes up and then you get into it. I saw myself about to do that, and it just popped into my mind. What if you don't do that? Like, what if you don't? I can see what you're going to do, but what if you don't? And I think it's really profound that once you start looking in this direction, you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. I'd never seen myself thinking before. If you'd said to me, oh, you don't want to do so much thinking, where's the space that would give me that off ramp? I had no idea. But in that moment, I saw it and I thought, yeah. And I decided not to. And I plonked right back in the car. We had a great time. I had a really nice day. And I forgot to worry about my relationship for the next 2 weeks. I just kind of had a really nice time. I sent Leela some letters. So when I got back to England, and we spoke on the phone, and she said, could we get together? Because she wanted to break up with me. I'd forgotten we had a problem. I was just having a nice time. So I said to her, yeah, sounds great. Let's get together. And so we did, and we had a really nice time. And she thought, oh, this is different. This is nice. And so we have stayed together. And I mean, we've had our points where we reconsidered that, obviously, along the way. And we've gone back to the principles each time, and so far we've kind of decided to stay together. But what was really interesting about it is a perfect example of, if I don't get wrapped up thinking my disturbed thoughts, there's nothing to keep them there. There's nothing to stop me from going back to clarity and well-being. And it suddenly occurred to me, what if insecurity and what if that's the answer to self-consciousness? What if that's, I thought, well, what would that mean? Well, it would mean that, firstly, if you weren't so busy thinking about how to be comfortable, you'd be comfortable. Well, that's easy. Not thinking takes no effort. I was getting a feel for that. I was starting to get a feel for just leaving my mind and not having it be doing something all the time. I thought, okay, that I buy. And then your only challenge, Aaron, so this was when I was about to go to a cocktail social, which is like my all-time worst. It's like a dinner party without the food. So there's nothing in it. So I was going to go to this. It was like, well, if you're going to try this principles for your self-consciousness, then firstly, if you're at ease, you should feel fine, and you'd be having a good time. It's fine. Okay. But then if you get insecure, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel self-conscious, then your challenge, your job is to be comfortable feeling it as long as possible, so it has a chance to just drift right over you. That's your challenge. Like, if you feel insecure, self-conscious in any way, your job is see if you can bear to go through it and not try to help yourself. I'm like, all right, that's my mission. I can take my mission. So I went to this cocktail party, and I'm standing with a group of people having drinks. And the first thing I noticed is that I'm at ease. I'm really at ease, and I'm enjoying myself. It almost felt like, check me out. I'm enjoying myself. There were things that were possible for me that I thought I was literally incapable of. But yet I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't trying. I was just enjoying myself. And when I was enjoying myself, I was interested in what other people were saying, because I wasn't preoccupied with my own concerns. And when I listened to them, I had things to say. And I was like, what? Things to say without 10 minutes of analysis? That's amazing. And I mean, it's hard to describe, but it was amazing to me that I could do and be and feel things that I'd struggled to get close to with no success for over 10 years. I mean, it really points to the power, the unrestricted infinite power of mind, and how it's so impersonal. I mean, it was amazing. All of a sudden, I start to feel a chill. Now, I don't know if you've seen that program, Stranger Things. Have you seen that program, Stranger Things? Well, there's this parallel universe that people pop into that looks like a really grimy, dark, cold version of the normal world. And that's what it felt like. All of a sudden, I'm standing in this group of people, and I just start to feel really uncomfortable and all alone and desperately uneasy and self-conscious, and I don't know where to put myself, and I can't stand it. And everything in me is like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I'm like, well, Aaron, your assignment is do nothing. I'm like, with this? Yeah, with this. That's the whole point. We're considering that it's just a feeling from a thought. Remember? I'm like, oh, I'll do my best. I thought, okay, I only have one thing to do, and that's do nothing and kind of be as comfortable as I can, feeling desperately uncomfortable. So I just tried it. And to my surprise, I just felt this unbearable discomfort that just started to fade away. And within it could have been seconds. It felt like minutes, but it probably wasn't minutes. It faded away. And all of a sudden, I'm back at ease, enjoying myself. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that something that I had felt so real, that I would work so hard to deal with, was a trick. It's a trick. You know, when things pop up on your internet and if you click them, you get a whole host of problems on your computer. It was that. It was just, don't click. Don't fall for the temptation. Don't click. And it was really showed me how thought works, that if you treat a thought as real and you try to think from it or deal with it or fight it, you're powering it in some way. And I'd been doing that my whole adult life. And in hindsight, I saw, wow, self-consciousness comes from respecting the thoughts you have about yourself. That's what self-consciousness is. Shyness comes from respecting your uncomfortable thoughts. Insecurity comes from respecting your insecure thoughts. And what I realized is you can get good at having disturbed thoughts. And what does it mean, get good at having disturbed thoughts? Well, it means being willing to have them and not have it be a problem, and know that they don't have any useful information for you. They're just trying to tempt you to get involved. So getting comfortable feeling bad, getting comfortable knowing that what you're thinking and seeing is a trick. It's a trick. It's designed to pull you in. It's internet marketing. It's every kind of marketing. There has to be an emotional hook. Otherwise, people don't care. And thought has the ultimate emotional hook. It knows you. It knows what you care about. And it knows how you feel about things. And it's starting to be willing to call your own bluff and to, in a way, stop caring about the feelings that make you, the thoughts and feelings that make you uncomfortable, so that you can feel shy without getting shy. You can feel self-conscious without getting self-conscious. You can feel insecure without getting insecure. Or let's say you get insecure and you're willing to say, oh, yeah, I just got wrapped up in a bunch of insecure thinking. Oh, well, that happens too. So, and I think behind that is the willingness to consider, I'm not shy. I just feel like I am when I have shy thinking, and I have the experience that I am when I take that thinking on as if it's true, real, or helpful. Now, I didn't know that. I had to discover it. I discovered, oh, I'm not shy. I just feel shy when I have shy thinking. And I get shy when I live by that thinking. It was really helpful in parenting because one of my kids was really, really shy. Actually, they were shy, but then they got really, really shy. Like they would go in and out of shy. And then they got really, really shy. Like they started refusing to say hello to strangers, and they would just hide behind my legs. Now, I'm so grateful I knew that that was thought and not anything more. That they'd made a decision. Instead of having shy thinking and feeling shy and acting shy, and then not being shy and being very exuberant and going in and out of different thoughts, they started to identify with the shy one, so they just stuck with it as a default. And when I said to them, I asked them, I said, well, what's going on with you? They said, oh, I'm shy. I said, well, I know you're shy sometimes. So, oh, no, I'm a shy person. I said, I don't think so. He said, well, I think so, Dad. And, with all due respect, just, I think I know better than you. I said, okay, fine. But it was funny talking to him because he says, well, I'm shy. I said, well, sometimes you're shy, but sometimes you could do with being a bit shyer because a bit out of control, if you ask me. Now, what was interesting was he stuck with that thought for a number of months, and then he came out of it. He lived by that thought, and then he kind of left it behind, and he goes in and out of shy now, just like me. Goes in and out of insecure, just like me. For the person that asked that question, do you have a follow-up question? Does that do anything for you? The person who said that?
So yes, yes. So thank you. It's been really helpful. And we have another question. So seems like there are two logical implications: disrespect and clear thinking, and open up space and act more on clear thinking. Could you speak about the second part? So I guess it's like act more on clear thinking.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Let us know if that's the right thing, or
yeah,
you can ask questions if you want. So you're going to mute yourself, but
yeah.
We'll ask from here.
It's funny you should say that, Razmik. It was you, Razmik. So, somebody asked me that. I'm going to lose track of time. I think it was earlier on today. No, I think it was earlier on today. Because we were talking about they were asking about the self-consciousness thing, and I was talking about having a different relationship to uncomfortable, disturbed thought. That you can have a very healthy relationship to disturbed thought. I mean, and all you really need to do is to consider that, it's contaminated thought. It doesn't have much to offer, and to understand that it affects the way you see things, so that's going to be off. It affects the way you feel about things, so that's going to be off. It affects the way you think about, and just to appreciate, oh, I'm kind of under the influence. I've always found really useful. But then they said, well, what about this having a more open, clearer mind? What about that? Like, where's that fit in? I got the first part. What about the second part? And I was reflecting on my own experience, and here's what happened to me. So I had the insight that I talked to you about earlier, which was I really saw that I was looking for answers by thinking. I was looking for answers by analyzing. And when I looked at my life, I'd never gotten a clear new thought from analyzing, ever. And I'd spent 95, 97% of my time looking for answers by analyzing. And what fascinated me even more is that all of the answers, all of the solutions, all of the new pieces of understanding had come out of the blue with a feeling of, oh. And I hadn't done that. That had just happened. And it dawned in my mind, firstly, you're looking for clarity in a place it doesn't come from. So you're using the wrong tool. There's all this thinking makes no sense. And secondly, it's amazing that it's almost like that plants coming through concrete. It's like you, in the few moments when you're not concentrating, or you go into the toilet, or you sitting down, or everything you need has come to mind. That really blew my mind. And what I got from that, Razmik, is, oh, I don't need to think to get what I need. I don't need to think to get what I need. That's all I saw. It made perfect sense. It's like, so my interest in thinking about things to get answers went down like 80%. It just disappeared overnight. And that was all I was at that. I wasn't looking for it. I just saw that, and that happened. When I went home, something strange happened, right? I started to appreciate what my experience was like when I wasn't thinking. And several things happened. Is the first thing that happened is when I wasn't doing all that thinking, I just started to feel so lovely. Just started to feel so lovely. And I can remember realizing, wow, it takes no effort to feel lovely. This is the underlying feeling. So the less you do mentally, the more lovely you feel. And I can remember thinking, I can't wait to get on my plane. So it's like a 10-hour plane ride from Seattle to London. And plane rides used to be my worst. I was so agitated that I needed so many things to preoccupy myself. So I'd get on a plane, I'd have tapes, CDs, snacks, books, comics. I mean, I was like a hoarder. And I remember thinking, wow, I can just sit there and just have a fantastic time. I can just sit there and there's nothing to stop me feeling fabulous. And I was just looking forward to getting on a plane and sitting there for 10 hours. And that started to happen in my life back home, that I just started feeling good and enjoying myself and appreciating what, like I walked from my mum's house, which I'd walked every day of my life, and I was starting, wow, that's a really nice building. And it was just natural. So I really started to appreciate that in the absence of being preoccupied, my consciousness filled up with something richer and deeper and at times fresher. And then I started to appreciate the feeling of that. So I started to appreciate, the feeling of a clearer, less personal thought. But I stumbled on that because it stopped making sense to me to be doing all that thinking. So I stumbled on the fact that there's nothing to do, that there's no second step. It's a residual category. It's what's left over. Now, there have been times in my life and my learning where I've been hell-bent on getting there and finding that and remembering that, and how did I get there and why aren't I there now? It's never gotten me anywhere. It's just been times when I've been thinking and haven't realized it wouldn't get me where I was going. So I think it's useful to see, no, that's not a second step. That's just what's left over. There's no step. There's no step there. And what's nice about that when I realized that, Razmik, is I realized, why am I trying to get in a better state when I'm going to end up there anyway? And it was a shift to be like, ooh, how'd you get there, to, how'd you not end up there? I mean, I can just assume that's where I'm going to end up. Like that, there's nowhere else to go. That's the real part. Everything else is just the figments of our creative capacity.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And what I meant was, like, for me, as soon as I got a bit of a grasp of that, I've started kind of being very careful with how much I trust my thinking. Mm-hmm. But then at some point it dawned on me that as much as if feeling is an indicator to the quality of thought, and if I can use that to not pay too much attention to thought that doesn't feel good, mm-hmm. by the same token, I could kind of trusted clarity or whatever hunches would come to me when I was in clear states.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
what I was referring to.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Because the person I was speaking to today, we had the same conversation. It's like we're used to thinking that a thought becomes credible at the end of a thought process, and realizing, no, if it has a feeling of ease, of freshness, that feeling, sometimes we talk about insight or realization or clarity, that's a good sign. To me, that, I mean, don't let me, to me, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
And having that, using that guide has really helped me discover the unfathomable power of mind. Like, you follow a thought that has a feeling of clarity and insight and ease, and it leads you in a direction of things that you could never have known, things that you could never have known, or you don't take it seriously. Like the amount of times I've had a really logical thought and a thought that's like, actually, you know, probably that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, what randomness is that? And so I've gone with my thought, only to find that there were like 2-3 really good reasons I wish I hadn't done that. No, I didn't know those reasons, but that clearer thought, my understanding is that clearer thought knew that already. But I didn't respect what that feeling meant. That feeling meant it wasn't personal, it wasn't invested. There was a less restricted, impersonal wisdom, intelligence to it. And that's what Sid pointed to that was profound, is we're not limited to the individual thought that we have. We're in the form of an individual, but actually we're all the same consciousness, all the same intelligence, and it's infinite. Right? Now, what he also said is, if you recognize that, you're not going to struggle with insecurity. And it's true. Like, if you have an insecurity and you put on the other, you've got scales, and on the one hand, you've got your insecurity, and you put on the other side, oh, I'm the infinite intelligence of the universe without restriction. Yeah, it tends to go that way. So yes, I think what you're saying is right. But I had to experiment with trusting that, and I had to appreciate what that feeling meant about the depth and wisdom of my thought. And the more I've appreciated about that, the more logical it is to trust it. And so it's a learning. It's just a learning, like as we've been talking about.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
I think for me, I love what you just said there, Aaron, because I've always kind of struggled with thoughts about my disability. Yes. And thoughts about, am I good enough? And when I came across this understanding, what I realized was the fact that it's so freeing when I discovered that I don't have to believe that. I don't have to believe that Wayne has got a disability. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was just the kind of being able to breathe and not kind of be weighed down with such a thought of having such a weighted thought that I've had for most of my life.
Mm. I love that. I love that. It shows you how something so simple can be profound, like so profound in every area.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't know if I'm hearing you right, Wayne. So you put me straight, okay, if I need it. But what I heard when you said that is, in life, it often makes sense to have a reality, or to see a reality, or buy into a reality that feels bad in some way or other, right? But what Sid pointed to is like, firstly, whether it makes sense or not is neither here nor there. It's completely optional, and it's not the best, it's not the clearest, it's not the most helpful. So you don't need to. And the unconditional nature of that is powerful. because it takes us beyond what we think it's related to. And what you said is such a good example of that. It reminds me, I had this woman that I was working with, and she was legally blind, right? And on the third day we were working together, she came in and she said, I've just realized that I don't have to be anxious. And I was like, great, because that's one of the points of the program. She says, no, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm mildly anxious all the time. And I assumed that was because of the reality that I'm blind and I could fall at any moment. So I didn't think the program was to do with that. And I was thinking, oh God, nor did I. She says, but I've seen that that's a thought. I don't have to have that thought just because I might fall over. You might fall over. I'm like, yeah, that's true. It's so that is such a good example of it's the same. It's just powerful. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really cool.
I remember when I had personal training sessions, and one of the goals that my trainer was talking to me about was walking with one stick, and I managed to do it. But also we were kind of just getting me more mobile. And at the very start, he was like, right, okay, stand up without anything. So just stand up without holding on to anything. And I said, I can't. So all I did was literally hold his fingers, his tips of his fingers.
Yeah.
And my mind just went into overdrive. And I said, I can't do that. And he said, what's stopping you? And I said, well, I'm going to fall. And he said, how many times have you fallen in your life?
Mm.
And I said, well, more than I can remember. And he said, have you been all right? Yeah. He said, because you've learned to fall. So what difference is it going to make if you fall?
Mm.
If you fall, you fall.
Yeah.
And for me, it was that kind of just made me do it, and was just kind of like, you know what? If it happens, it happens.
Mm.
And I was just like, okay. And as I said, I was literally holding on to the end of his fingers. Going from holding on to sticks, being in a wheelchair, holding on to anything, literally sitting from as I'm sitting now to just standing up.
Wow.
With nothing.
That's cool.
And for me, that was probably one of the most powerful realizations of this understanding that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And this is coming from someone that didn't even know the principles.
Yeah.
And it's like we've always said, we don't have to mention the principles to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And for me, that just highlights that.
Yeah, it's so true. Oh, that's so cool. That's very cool. And what I love about what you're saying, Wayne, is in my experience, I go in and out of really appreciating how unlimited the potential of this understanding is.
Yeah.
You know, and it's always humbling to realize, oh yeah, you don't know. It goes beyond what you can imagine. It goes way beyond what you can imagine. And it's really useful to remember that, because it keeps you humble, and being humble allows you to keep appreciating and learning, and so it stays fresh. It's good.
Yes, it's incredible, because I realize also that I come to things that I think, well, this is thought, but that is, say, a physical problem. So that's not going to change. But then I work in rehabilitation, and I've seen things that I've seen now, people, many of them, that have not have to have, say, their surgery done because their frozen shoulder has started moving, and that's like, whoa. And and the surgeons go like, oh, we don't understand. Well, maybe it wasn't that bad to start with. We misdiagnosed it. And then at the beginning I was wow, oh, okay, this is unheard of. All right, this is incredible. And now I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. But like 2 days ago, I was feeling a bit under the weather. I was like saying to him, it may be COVID. I may, or it's flu. Okay, I know if I'm uncomfortable with this feeling of feeling ill, it's okay. I'm going to be uncomfortable, and maybe I'm not going to have, it's probably COVID. And I was absolutely sure all the symptoms were, I thought, well, it's like if you're tired or hungry, comes from your physical being. So I need to understand that. And I had a session. So I went into the session. I thought, I'll do my best. And I'm there, and I go in, and I'm completely in with this person, and we're talking and we're laughing, and it's beautiful. And I come out of it and I have no more symptoms. I have no more symptoms. Now, I should have go and pay her for the session, because really, really actually was a reminder. I haven't seen that happen before for me. I didn't. That for me was a clear case of, well, this is a virus in my body that I cannot go and say, I can have a better experience, but or not, or a horrible experience of me. But a virus is a virus, and it's going to do its thing. Now, I was like, what? What? And that's when we say about, like seeing the impossible being done and happen. Sometimes it's so imperceptible and so little, Sometimes it's somebody standing on a finger.
Yes.
And sometimes it's just being able to talk at a dinner party, and we take that for granted, of what a change in your life that is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's very cool.
So I don't know if anybody has any last questions or wants to share something. Please feel free.
Hello. Hello, Mr. AT. When you was talking there, I got like a notion of it. We see when we see, but if we feel when we do feel, instead of just seeing for when we just see, if you get what I'm trying to say. Because we don't, when you're seeing, you're actually dealing with what you're seeing. You're not dealing with what you're actually feeling inside. So you're dealing with your subconscious instead of dealing with what actually inside you. So if you stop actually seeing what needs to be seen and actually start seeing what you need to feel, that will point you to what you actually need to be dealing with, instead of trying to deal with the outside. Because when we're dealing with the outside is what you're seeing with your eyes. So instead of dealing with what you're dealing with with your eyes, like, because we're, as humans, we're always we're copycats. As a child, you copycat. You know what I mean? So if you stop actually, so that's what I got. If you stop seeing with your eyes and actually start feeling, start seeing with what you're feeling. So see with your feelings, and your feelings will point you in that direction. So it's like, if you feel that anxiety, it's a feeling. So just sit with that feeling instead of looking out. No, look within that feeling, and it will point you to something else. So that's what I got from it. I just wanted to add to stop. All of us stop looking with our eyes and start seeing with our feelings. If they could have eyes, they would say a lot. They would speak back to us. And sometimes we need to sit with ourselves. And it took a while for me to get this understanding, because I just caught a little blip of it as well, and I didn't know that someone with so much knowledge still gets that edge, like, oh, am I losing it? Like, what's going on? And then I gave me confidence to just speak right now, because I felt like, I was by myself and I didn't want to be seen. And I didn't like that. I didn't want to be seen because I felt shy. Like, I'm not shy though. I'm not a shy person. So it was warming just to know someone with a bit of that, not from a lot of knowledge, still gets a little, So thank you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I just love what you just said and the way that you said it. I just love that. That was awesome. That you see what you see with your eyes points you in the wrong direction. But if you see what your feelings point to, you see what you're actually up against or what you actually want to do. That was so cool. I got a lot out of that. Thanks for that. And the other thing I'm glad you reminded me. Sorry, Christopher, were you going to say something?
No. That's it.
So the other thing I wanted to say was, and I meant to say this earlier, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is everybody gets lost in thought. Everybody. And the difference I've noticed between people that have been involved 5 years and people that have been doing it for 40 years is people involved 40 years expect it. People involved 5 years think they're going to beat it. That's the only difference. And so when you know, it goes with the territory, thought is super tricky. It plays on your eyes. You forget your feeling. You follow your eyes. The more it's easier. It's like, got lost again. Okay, fine. As opposed to, damn it, got lost again. I'll beat the system one day. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Laura, hi.
I've seen you on other forums, so I know you don't know me. My question is though, what do we do? Just wait it out? Wait out that the thoughts that, I mean, I've had some upsetting things and I just think about it. And then I realize I'm thinking. And so what are you saying? Like, how do we end it sooner?
Well, here's a little bit of something to consider. Okay. So at the very beginning of the talk, one of the things I wanted to point out was, I don't think I did, but I did want to, is as you start to understand a bit more, at least for me, the importance of the ups and downs of thought goes down. See, because mind stays the same, right? You're the same intelligence, the same purity of spirit all the time, but you're experiencing it through these ups and downs of thought. Okay. Right now, there was a period where I was like, yeah, I get that. So definitely into the ups, not so much the downs. So we're going to shrink the downs and we're going to expand the ups, right? Which is a fabulous idea. It just doesn't help. It's just not helpful. The most helpful thing I learned was when it dawned on me, hold on a second. The difference between anger and well-being is an illusion. It's an illusion. What is anger? Oh, it's a formless energy. Okay, cool. In the form of anger. Okay. What's love and well-being? Oh, it's a formless energy. Oh, okay. So what I realized is, I'm overly reacting to the appearance of it. Right? So in a way, it'd be like my son coming downstairs in a devil's costume and me going, I didn't want to see you. And then him coming down in his clothes and saying, oh, but I did want to see you. And then him coming down in a ghost costume, was like, I don't want to see you. And then him coming down. Now, if I knew it's him all along, not so relevant. And I think one of the things that Sydney Banks was pointing to is it's not, the differences aren't real. And because they're not real, they're not sustainable. And we take that to mean, oh, phew, I don't have to suffer for long. Whereas actually what he's saying is, yes, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So what I notice, Laura, is when I want to get away from the bad feeling and get to the good feeling, it takes longer. And I'm come to the conclusion it's because I'm buying into the illusion. Whereas when I realize, look, it's all variations of the same, what does Sid say? It's the same thing in a different disguise. It's the same energy in a different disguise. It can't hurt me. It's not doing anything. It's messing with my eyes. It's messing with the way I feel, but that's not a real thing. If you really consider that, there's a point at which you're like, oh, it's more like the advertisements between a program than it is like a program I don't want to watch. So nobody turns on TV to watch the advertisements, but it doesn't really bother hardly anybody because it's like, But you can take real offense to it. Oh, I don't watch things with advertisements. But it's an understanding, and the more understanding, if you say, well, there's a feeling to understanding, and that feeling to understanding is, oh, I'm willing to consider the difference is illusory. It's not something I need to worry about. So then you can start to see when you get desperate to get out of it, that's a thought that's not helpful. See, there's a feeling to understanding. Now, I'm not saying this is how I live. I'm not saying that, Laura. So like, I'm like I told you earlier in the lockdown, I'm like, I'm doing negative. I don't like how I'm doing. But it's at some point it called, hold on, this isn't what it feels like to have it in perspective. When you have it in perspective, you know it's thought, then it stops mattering so much what kind of thought you happen to have at 2:10 or Tuesday through Friday, or that's the direction. And every time I've tried to help myself get out of it, it tells me I'm taking it too seriously to start with, and it's good money after bad. Does that make sense?
That's very helpful.
Okay.
Very helpful. Yeah. Because it was part anger. It was, me being upset and I want to change this and I want to fix it. And I was thinking, how can I do that? And that didn't help. And yeah, that totally makes sense. It's all thought. And I will re-listen to this.
Right. Because, one of the things that blew my mind was when learning what I talked about in that research was like, oh, there's nothing inherently problematic about anxious thought. It's the problem we have with it that makes it a problem. Before that, it was just another thought. Or as Christopher said, we mistake it for, oh, reality's gotten worse. That's not helpful, but you can understand, oh, no, that's just the way anxiety affects the way I see things. So,
yeah.
Amy.
Oh, no, that's great. Yes. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. It was a pleasure. It was nice to be with you guys and just see you all.
Thank you so much. It's been incredible. It's been an absolutely incredible evening for us. Time during this episode. Aaron, we can't thank you enough. It's I always see something that propels me to something really important in my life. Mostly every time I hear you talk, and it really looks like it comes from you. And in this occasion, we're gonna keep that because I like the illusion.
That's right.
I remember we were at the either we're at the conference or we're at the practitioners conference, and we asked a question about, well, you know, we really tried to make something happen, and we have a series and we don't know what to do and work and how we do it. And you just went on some lines of like, I don't think it's a question about money, or, you know, and then you said something amazing, which probably can't remember.
Yeah.
And then we started sort of like some of that thinking we had just dropped, and we got to do more and more of this and create more stuff. So thank you so much. How can people find you, and how they can contact you on One Thought?
Oh, you can find me on onethought.com, and my email is aaron@onethought.com. We have a full online learning platform now at onethoughtonline.com. There's several, you can start it for free, see whether you think it's bogus. You know, it's designed for new people to learn about this. So if you know, you might see it and think, oh, that'd be good for my uncle or whatever. But that's where you can find me in those places.
Brilliant, thank you. So next week we're going to have Susan Marmot, which you may know.
I do know.
You do
well.
know.
Yeah.
She's been very well trained. I heard of. So Susan actually trained with you in One Thought.
She worked at One Thought for a bit as well. For quite a while. Yeah.
There you go. She's been and Chris also knows about her. You know, she's been working also with Young Recovery and in prisons and with the homeless, and they're cooking something very beautiful with Liliana Bellini and Louis Scott, which they're coming at nearly the end of this series to talk about that. But in this case, next week at the same time, which is 7:30 p.m. here in the UK, she's going to come and talk about the magic that you can find through relationships. So you're all very welcome to come next week, and please also, you know, the uncle that Aaron said that may want to come as well, just let him know. And so thank you again, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.